Okay, guys, Mrs. Benshoff here, and I want to make a quick video to discuss Emily Dickinson's I'm Nobody, Who Are You? So, if you reviewed that Understanding Poetry handout, one of the things that's mentioned in the handout is the first thing you should do when you are given a poem is to read it and to read it aloud because poetry is meant to be spoken. And so we're not going to worry about analyzing it right away. We're just going to read it. So we have, I'm nobody. Who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us. Don't tell. They'd advertise. You know. How dreary to be somebody. How public like a frog. To tell one's name the livelong day to an admiring bog. Okay, guys, next, typically in class, I would ask you, what's your gut reaction? Think about that now. Are you confused? Um, does this person seem like she's shying away from the limelight? Does she sound depressed? Is she proud? There's no right or wrong answer here. It's just your gut reaction. After we have your gut reaction, it's time to take a closer look at the poem. And anytime we have the opportunity to do so, I'm going to have you annotate text. So this is where you mark it up. And on a side note, I haven't quite figured out how to do that at the same time as I'm talking to you because my microphone's plugged into the computer. But at any rate, here's my mess of annotations. And so I'll try to explain it as we go. But if we take a look at the first line, which also happens to be the title, when we look at I'm nobody, right away we see that there's an exclamation point. So we know that this is being said with emotion. And for me, it seems kind of contradictory because typically we'd think if somebody's like, I'm nobody, that they'd be saying it, in sort of this like depressed, melancholy way. But this exclamation point suggests that there's some passion there, there's some emotion. And so, maybe that emotion is anger, maybe it's happiness, maybe it's just really confusion or something. But there's some kind of emotion there, some kind of passion, maybe excitement. And then we have, who are you? So, first line of the poem, we already have a question, and this is being asked of us. Who are we? When we think about that, what is the writer really getting at? I think the poet's asking us to think about our own identities and ourselves. And if I haven't said this yet, a lot of what we talk about in English 10 is this idea of what does it mean to define who we are? How are we shaped by our personal experiences, by our relationships with others, by our culture? You've all had different experiences and that's what makes you an individual. And if you come back to the high school 10 years from now, you're going to be different. And part of that is because of those experiences and those relationships that you have and that you'll encounter as you continue to grow up. But back to the poem, I think, she's asking us about our identity. So that's line 1. We look at line 2. Are you nobody too? So again, we have another question, and that's supposed to say curious. It totally does not look like that. My pen is off, but this question is, you know, uh, she's asking us another question, and so the speaker of the poem, whether it's Emily Dickinson or not, because poets can create speakers just like authors and novelists can create different characters. But, I'll probably refer to the speaker as a she simply because it's easier. But at any rate, here we are, line 2. Are you nobody too? We have another question. And so the speaker seems very curious as to what our identity is. Then there's a pair of us. What is there a pair of? There's a pair of nobodies. Don't tell. I wonder why the speaker wouldn't want us to tell. So maybe that's something we need to think of in the back of our back of our minds. And again, she's saying it with some force here with that exclamation point. Okay, so why doesn't she want us to tell? Maybe this last line of the first stanza answers it. They'd advertise. Okay, well, if you advertise something, you make it known. And so, all right, if you tell others, they're going to advertise that we're nobodies. So don't tell them. All right, so that's stanza one. And so you might ask yourselves, okay, what are those four lines getting at? And maybe you don't have an answer yet, but it seems like maybe, there's this idea the speaker who sees herself as a nobody, and she's assuming that the reader's like that too. And so she's grouping the reader with her. And so, she's feeling very passionately about being a nobody, but at the same time, she's not willing to tell everyone because they're going to make it known. All right? So let's look at the next four lines. Okay, so how dreary to be somebody. All right? What does that tell us? Well, dreary suggests that maybe she feels like it's sad, it's gloomy, it's bleak, it's dark, it's boring, it's dull. And again, she has this exclamation point here. So it seems like she doesn't want to be a somebody, How gloomy to be somebody, she says. So let's look at the last three lines. How public like a frog to tell one's name the livelong day to an admiring bog. Okay, so it seems like she's making a simile here with this word like, and that she's comparing somebody, the somebody, to being a frog. So she says, how public like a frog. And if something is public, it's known. It's put out there for everybody, okay? And then she says to tell one's name. Again, this connects to our identity. The livelong, all day. To an admiring, if you admire someone, you look up to them. Bog, okay? Bog is like a marshy area, but it can also be suggestive of a burden of some sort. You get bogged down by schoolwork. So let's think about what a frog does. If you live beside, a pond or a creek or, the Auglaize River, you know that frogs announce their presence, okay? They tell their name, they ribbit, they croak. And when it's frog season, and I don't know when that is, but, they ribbit incessantly again and again and again. So they announce their presence all day long, okay, to the marshy area, to those around them. So let's think about that for a minute. What is that? How is that like being a somebody? So think in your mind right now of a person that you would consider a somebody. So really, I think, everybody is a somebody. We all have expectations that we have to live up to. Our friends expect a certain set of behaviors from us. Our parents expect certain things. So for example, imagine a student athlete that you know. You expect that on Friday they're probably going to the football game. They're going to wear athletic clothes. They're probably going to get good grades in school. And it might seem like I'm stereotyping here. I don't mean to be, but we expect certain things from those student athletes. If a student athlete, just think of one in your mind, showed up to school on Friday with jeans, boots, and a flannel shirt, listening to country music, you're going to be surprised. You're going to be taken aback. That person's friends might ask, hey, what's going on with you today? Why aren't you doing this or why aren't you doing that? My whole point is that as a somebody, we have certain expectations. People define us by certain things: our parents, our friends, our teachers, society around us. But in terms of what the author is saying, when she's a nobody, she's defining herself. But if someone says, look, Emily Dickinson thinks she's a nobody, she suddenly becomes the somebody that thinks she's a nobody. And so Emily Dickinson is no longer defining herself as a nobody. The society around her is. So overall, it would seem to suggest that what the poet is saying here is that it's better to be a nobody and define oneself than be a somebody and be defined by others. Okay? Is your mind exploding yet? These 8 lines, is that what you walked away with at first? But I think when you break it down, that interpretation makes sense. And so now we need to look at part 2, okay, on the back side. And I just want to see how long I have. Okay, so I have 11 minutes. I am going to make a second video for part 2, okay? So I'll see you shortly.